The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back talking vintage sports from the old garden on 49th Street, and we're right outside of Nedick's, and I can smell the smoke and the stale orange drink as if it were 50 years ago and we were really out there. This is all in our imagination, and it helps us get ready to talk a little ball, sports, basketball, hockey, whatever we talk. We even talk baseball, keeping Hal Bock happy along the way.
Hi, Ralph.
But, hey, Al Blumkin's here, too. Hal Bock is here. Al Blumkin is here. George Case III is here. And Mr. Hubler of the David Variety is here.
Righto.
And we have a terrific show. It is right up George Case's alley. He was an athletic shoe distributor, and he'll tell you the story. He'll tell you the story of what's going on in the current shoe scandal. It's monumental. Coaches are being fired. Careers are being lost. Tell us about it, George Case.
Okay, well, here's my take on this whole thing. First of all, I feel partially responsible in that in the early 1970s, I came up with the idea of having a college basketball coaches advisory staff. And at the time, we had about 6 or 7 major college coaches. We were paying them a very small amount of money. For that, they would speak for our athletic shoe brand at coaches' clinics. They would represent us in the summertime at basketball camps. And their teams would wear our basketball shoes. So it was very innocent, very small, very low-key. We had about 7 or 8 of the top college basketball coaches in the country at the time. Johnny Orr from Michigan, Judd Heathcote, Michigan State, Denny Crum of Louisville, Tom Young at Rutgers, Tom Davis when he was at Iowa, Gail Catlett, West Virginia, and George Raveling, who was at Washington State. They were our major college coaches. And then we had Morgan Wooten, who was the head basketball coach at DeMatha Catholic, which was the top high school basketball program in the country. So, you know, they represented our brand, and it was very low-key. And what's happened today is that big money has really corrupted the game as far as I'm concerned. It's now reaching down into the high schools. University of Louisville had signed a $160 million contract with Adidas, and Adidas was going to supply all the product to all the teams at Louisville. And in addition, there was $100,000 which was being funneled through one of the assistant coaches to the family of a Louisville recruit to ensure that recruit would play college basketball at Louisville. This was offered to his family during the young man's senior year in high school. Quite honestly, it really bothers me because the corruption now is starting to reach into the high schools, which is just horrible. And I think about 6 of the coaches plus the director of worldwide marketing for Adidas have been arrested. And the fact is that I think it was about $160 million in total, $100,000 in payment. And then Rick Pitino lost his job as a result, as did Ed Jurek, the athletic director at Louisville. So it's the tip of the iceberg. I think there's more. This has just come out in the last few weeks, and just the other day, there was a long article that was written for Bloomberg about this so-called scandal. And I just, again, it's called College Basketball Made Louisville then broke it. So that was the headline of the article. And, again, that's my take on where we are right now. And, I'd be interested to hear what, some of the other panelists think about what's going on, because it really bothers me.
Okay, let's start with Hal Bock.
Well, it strikes me that what's at the heart of this is simple greed. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And when there's money to be made, and TV is part of this as well, the enormous television contracts that have been awarded to college basketball, college sports, it all comes down to dollars and cents. And it's unfortunate. My school, NYU, plays Division III basketball. No scholarships, and it's just a very pure version of the game. It's not as high quality as you would see in the tournament and the Final Four and all of that, but it's a fun version of college basketball. And I think Dave Hubler would agree with me. He's an NYU man as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I must say it was disappointing those years when there was no basketball following the scandals of the early 60s. It was very disappointing to not have those Thursday nights at the Garden for those college doubleheaders. But certainly Hal is right. And, it looks like every once in a while some school will appear almost out of nowhere. Like UNLV. All of a sudden UNLV became this college powerhouse. And the same thing happened with one of the Christian schools. I forget which one it was.
Gonzaga?
No, not
Loyola Chicago?
No, well, Loyola Chicago actually had one of my high school alumni on the team. Jerry Harkness played for Loyola Chicago.
I watched. They came back and played in the Holiday Festival at the Garden, and I kept score of that game. Not for my own personal purposes. I remember keeping score of that game because Harkness was in New York.
Yeah, a great ball player.
And that was a terrific team.
Yeah. But the team that I was thinking of, he'd been an evangelical faith healer. He had a big following. He set up a university.
I think you're talking about Oral Roberts.
Oral Roberts,
yeah,
thank you.
Yeah.
That's it. And they, too, for a number of years, they had this powerhouse basketball team. And as Hal said, it was a great way to raise money. They brought in kids that really probably, I shouldn't say really, but probably didn't qualify for other major universities. And they made a lot of money off their basketball talents.
I want to step in here a minute, David and Hal. I want to just mention something. A lot of those kids at those various schools, and I'm not going to name names or point fingers, but a lot of those young men, they go to those colleges, they never get a degree. They're there as a hired hand, they're there as a basketball, player or a football player. A lot of them, never even receive a degree because they really don't attend class. And yet the school and the NCAA is making millions and millions of dollars off of their backs. And a lot of kids, they realize
George,
that.
You're not pointing fingers at the player.
I'm not pointing fingers at the players. I'm pointing fingers at the colleges that do
at
that.
The institutional.
Right.
George, I remember talking to Lou Rossini, who was the NYU basketball coach in those days, and took the team to the Final Four one year. And he said, a lot of these schools will bring in kids that we can't even touch because they don't have the grades.
Right.
And he was. I knew he was right. It was unusual, I thought, to hear him say it so publicly, but he did, and it's true. That wonderful Hoop Dreams, the documentary, tells the whole story in about an hour and a half.
Well, you know what, David, you're absolutely right, and you know it bothers me a lot because I happen to have attended Rutgers, and the players that I knew, I received my degree. I mean, I didn't get any special treatment. I wasn't that great a player, but the fact is that a lot of these kids, and through no fault of their own, they're recruited by these colleges. The boosters, they come and give them all kinds of perks and benefits. And the coaches will pretend and they'll say, I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
But the fact is, it's a fact of life. I mean, that's the way the colleges and what happened with like NYU and some of Division II, Division III schools. I mean, that's pure college basketball. But at the very top of the game today, when you're talking about a school like a Louisville, national champions, Rick Pitino, one of the most sought-after college coaches in the country, Rick was making, I think, $7 or $8 million a year in his contract with Louisville. And I can guarantee you that probably the entire administration, faculty of the University of Louisville weren't making anywhere near that kind of money combined.
Yeah, and there's probably the $7 million, and then on top of that, there were all endorsements, TV ads, all sorts of other stuff. And the thing is, we just talked about, and I'm sure George you'll agree, it's even worse today because now they're not just recruiting kids out of high school. They've got kids who are already on the list. They're down in junior high school.
Right.
There's one kid I saw a piece about him. He's like in the 7th or 8th grade. And they've labeled him, a can't miss college star.
Right. No, I've heard those same stories, David. Absolutely.
His his sense of overinflated self-worth at that age, he's going to think that his athletic skills will get him through life. What if he twists a knee in the 9th grade?
Sure.
Or blows a knee out. I want to, before I get on to asking about the old industrial basketball league.
Well, also now you have the one and dones, which is purely a creation of an agreement between the colleges and the NBA.
Right.
They can't go directly from high school into the NBA.
That's right.
Which is unconstitutional, but that's a whole other story.
You were the guy I was going to go to right then, Al Blumkin. Do you remember when all this started in terms of it going over the edge?
No, basically it's been something that's been in progress for a long time. And I think one of the things they have now, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, they have something like an AAU circuit that they go around in the summertime. The kids are recruited to play on AAU teams, and they play basketball. And that's also a showcase for colleges, and this is between high school and college.
Right.
And they're right. They had these kids probably as early as 12 years old. I mean, years ago, the first time I ever heard of then Lou Alcindor was when he was 12 or 13 in 1960, and the high schools were, debating which high school he was going to wind up going to. But back then that was a rare occasion, a rare occurrence. Now it's not.
Yeah, we have a Catholic school in Concord, California, that is, they almost have professional recruiting.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so incredibly well done. They were on a streak of winning like 40 games in a row, getting all kinds of national attention, and it's just become, high school has become almost semi-pro.
Oh yeah, and DC has a couple of schools in the Catholic League that are very, very good, near professional basketball. But the one thing about those schools is, for the most part, they really do they do really educate the kids as well. It's not like some of these private schools or academies that I remember years ago, Red Auerbach, when he was looking for guys to go into college and then perhaps recruit for the Celtics, he had a deal with Bullis Academy down here in Silver Spring, and he would send those guys to Bullis for a year or two of prep before they could be admitted into a college program. And I don't think, Bullis Academy is still here. I don't think they have any kind of agreement these days, but that was the place that Auerbach would send his prime recruits to get them into college, and then perhaps bring them into the NBA.
Well, a prime example of the impact of high school basketball was here in New Jersey. Bob Hurley was the coach at, I think it's St. Anthony's.
Yeah.
And they won so many state championships. And he wound up in the the Basketball Hall of Fame as a high school coach. And the school closed down because they didn't have the money to sustain them. But they had this great history of basketball, high school basketball, turning out player after player. And he wound up, as I said, in the Basketball Hall of Fame as a result. And now he doesn't have a school, doesn't have a team to coach.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Hal, I think when you mentioned St. Anthony's, if I remember correctly, and Bobby Hurley was a great high school coach, but they did not even have their own gym.
That's right.
They had to practice and play at other gyms. I mean, it was really a pure, it was as pure probably as basketball can be because they had great players. But the fact is that Hurley insisted that they were students and that he had to get these kids taken to a gym, a local gym to play and practice, and that's what they did. But Hurley himself was a sensational high school basketball coach.
Bob Huggins.
I'll tell you guys a story about an inadequate high school gym that produced an all-star basketball forward. His name was Paul Arison, and he played in a gym with an incredibly low ceiling, so that he had to develop this line drive shot. If any of you guys remember, an Arison shot was very distinctive, and it was because of a poor high school gym. Just had to interject that.
Well, you know what, Ralph, you mentioned something.
Yeah.
I just wanted to jump in here 1 second because, Ralph, you mentioned something. When I was playing high school basketball, I was a line drive shooter too, because when I was a youngster, I would practice in a gym in my church that had a very low ceiling, and we had to learn the only way we were going to shoot jump shots was to shoot line drive jump shots. So guys used to say to me, "Man, you shoot like Paul Arison." I said, "Yeah, I guess I did," because we couldn't put any kind of an arc on the ball because the ceiling was too low.
Well, it's amazing how what goes around comes around. Paul Arison was twice a semester, a year counselor. He'd come up and spend the day, as did Chuck Bednarik, on alternate Sundays because the camp was owned by Philadelphians, and they'd hire these guys to come up and, just spend all day with the kids with, clinics and hang with the kids and
he retired after 61, 62, and because he wouldn't move from Philly when they moved the Warriors out to San Francisco.
Right.
He retired.
He played a few years in
the Eastern League.
And did quite well and enjoyed life. I want to ask you guys if you do remember the Industrial League, and if there was something around like that today where guys could come out of high school, if they're not ready for college, they could go to work and play in this league. Basically, you'd be paid for playing. You'd work a little bit too, but Akron had a team. I can't remember all the teams in that league, but
Phillips Oilers
came out of there.
Yeah, the Phillips Oilers.
I think Wichita had a team in that league also.
They were mostly in the Midwest.
Yeah.
In industrial cities. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't think that can happen today because there's no, what they have now is the D leagues, which is run by the NBA.
Yeah, but
right.
Is that for free? That's not for undergraduates.
No. Undergraduates are one and done now.
Yeah,
one and done now.
But that's not good. And if they're one and done, they shouldn't be in. From that standpoint, because the one and dones cheapen the game as far as I'm concerned.
And of course the NCAA changed the rules too to allow freshmen to play varsity ball. When Hal and I were at NYU, you had to wait to be a sophomore year to play.
Right.
They all had freshmen teams.
Kareem Alcindor couldn't play as a freshman at UCLA.
Right.
That was still in effect then.
Yeah, I had mentioned that before because when it came to the purist, when talking about freshmen could not play, Bill Bradley when he was at Princeton. He could not play when he was a freshman. He could not play varsity, and the Princeton freshmen often would beat the Princeton varsity.
That's right. I remember
UCLA freshman when Kareem was there.
Right.
And that freshman ball, when you think about it, that was a pure basketball too. Because those kids were hoping to make the varsity.
Right.
Some of them, of course, were on scholarship, but there was nothing special about that. They were the warm-up game before the varsity came out and played. So in effect, it was pure college basketball.
Right.
And John Calipari is making, and others are making a living off one and done now. Even Krzyzewski, who the high moral ground is doing one and done.
Well, I was very troubled last season. My son and my money went to Syracuse University, so I follow the Orangemen. And last season, he brought in 2 transfer guys. Andrew White III. This was his 3rd college. What kind of a deal is that? Transferring from one school to another school to another school. I couldn't, you can't get into that as far as a fan.
Well, he might have been lied to by coaches, too. They over-recruit, they overstock a position. They tell a kid he's going to play every day, and he's on his way to the pros, and he sits. So
and then they have the 50-year senior.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I never heard of a 50-year
graduate transfer.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, anything.
I'm 71 years old. I don't know. I've got all the experts are going to teach me. What is a red shirt? How does that work?
A red shirt, I'll tell you exactly how it works. A red shirt is a player who does not play his freshman year, what would be his freshman year. So he starts his second year as a sophomore. He will be called a red shirt freshman. So then he will have 4 years to play college basketball or college football. So it is a red shirt. He does not play. Now, sometimes he could burn that shirt. In other words, if a coach is desperate and he wants to have this kid get in there, whether it be in a basketball game or a football game, and he plays a certain amount of quarters, then he in fact burns his red shirt. But the red shirt is offered to a kid, and a lot of young men will go that way, that they will get their degree or they will play 4 years of college basketball in 5 years because their freshman year they're considered a red shirt and cannot play.
Yeah, my alma mater, Pitt, did that with the quarterback in college this year. They played a kid who was redshirted, and he took over the team the last 2 games that they played, and they almost beat Virginia Tech, and they beat Miami. He was better than either of the 2 quarterbacks that they had before, one of whom was a graduate transfer.
Right. And they do that
sometimes transferring.
They do that sometimes because they've got a team
somewhere else.
They've got a team coming down the pike the next year or two that are really going to be good. So they'll hold this kid back so he'll play maximum time. The better players who are coming.
Right.
Somebody mentioned earlier about the kid tearing up his knee. Well, Syracuse recruited a kid out of the Bronx named McCullough, Chris McCullough, I think his name was, and he was a hotshot recruit, and he played about a dozen games in his freshman year and tore up his knee and immediately declared for the NBA draft. So he had about a dozen games of college basketball in his repertoire, in his resume, and he was drafted in the first round. Couldn't play for a year or so because he was recovering, but that, how it befuddles me when things like that go on. I mean, if you came to college, at least stay for a year. Go to a class occasionally, I understand you tore up your knee, and that's a tragedy, but all right, you still have your scholarship. You could stick around for a while.
Right.
He immediately declared for the NBA draft, and the NBA, which in my mind is complicit in all of this, immediately drafted him. The Nets drafted him. He got traded eventually. I don't know where he is now, but that just bothered me a lot.
There was 2 years ago in 2016, some Ohio State football player was asked about classes, and the kid said, "Classes? I'm not here to go to classes. I'm here to play football."
Right.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's so real of what a lot of it has become, and also now just recently, and I'm sure all you guys read about it. You got these 3 UCLA basketball players. They go to China. They're arrested for shoplifting.
Yeah.
And and now one of the kids' fathers, he's all been out of shape because Trump got involved or whatever. And I'm not taking any sides politically, but this is an indication of a lot of the kids, they're going over there, they're coddled, doing whatever. Here they go to a country like China, and all of a sudden they're convicted or arrested for shoplifting for
sunglasses.
Yeah, but they're sunglasses. That's what they did. They stole sunglasses.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
What they steal? A sunglass that was worth what, $50, and they're going to jeopardize their entire college career because of theft of sunglasses. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
They were Chinese sunglasses, but they were American ripoffs.
There you go.
All right.
ESPN is running a commercial, a promo for a Laker game that they're televising Friday night, and they started off with a picture of Lonzo Ball, who has done absolutely nothing in the NBA. It says Magic Johnson. He said this guy is going to be the face of the Lakers, and the guy's done nothing in the NBA, and everybody's out to get him because of his father.
Right.
And they're using him to promote. The ESPN is using him in a commercial to promote a game.
But he was thrown off the UCLA team, wasn't he?
No, that was his younger brother.
Oh, okay.
Lonzo Ball was the one who came out, and the father said he wouldn't go anywhere except to the Lakers. He was drafted by a team east of California. He wouldn't have signed, so he went to the Lakers, and the guys had a lot of trouble because, these players are after him. And
this
the opponents
reminds
are
me
after
of
him.
Venus and Serena Williams' father, the all-time interrupter of stuff early on in
but they proved out to have it. Both
right.
Okay, this kid hasn't proved anything yet.
Did they ever? Let me tell you.
Well, I'll tell you an interesting story about the college basketball. A friend of mine served as the cultural affairs officer at the U.S. Embassy in Athens a number of years ago, and UNC was invited over to Athens to play in a tournament during the summer, and it was just going to be a fun kind of thing. 4-team, they would represent the U.S. unofficially, and there were 3 other teams from 3 other countries. And this goes back to the time when there were still certain rules and regulations, most of which are no longer on the books. But so, and this was UNC was being coached at the time by they've named the
Dean Smith.
Dean Smith, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Dean Smith. So Smith takes his team over there, and suddenly, even before the first game, he hears from the NCAA that they're not allowed to play there. They can't play in the summer. And so my friend, who I said was the cultural affairs officer, was the person who was sort of shepherding the team while they were there, and he got involved in this, and he was able to work out for Dean Smith and the team that if the entire team took a summer class at one of the universities in Athens, that's obviously English speaking, then it would be considered summer school, and they could play in this tournament. So he arranged for the team to play, to take the course, and it was like a one day history of Greece kind of thing. You know, you can really wrap up the history of Greece in one day, right? And so they were able to play in the tournament, and Dean Smith was very, very grateful to my friend for having managed to pull this thing off. Today, probably you could just go over there and play, because they play all summer anyway somewhere.
Well, before we wrap it up, let me tell you my story of early 1950 college athletics. Things may not have changed all that much over the years. They asked Hugh McElhenney in his rookie year what was his biggest adjustment to pro ball. And he said, the pay cut.
In those days, it probably was. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so whatever it wasn't purely amateur ball even back then, and it probably never was.
Is anybody familiar with the Marx Brothers movie, The Horse Feathers?
Somewhat.
Sure, I've seen it over the years.
Yeah, it was with Huxley College, and instead of getting the two ringers, they wound up with Groucho and Chico and Harpo as the recruited football players. But nothing's changed.
I remember that.
And there's one line in there where Groucho says to the trustees, says, well, we'll tear down the college and put up a stadium. And one of them asks where the students sleep, and he says, where they always do, in the classroom.
Now, that's what, in the 30s?
Yeah, 1932 the movie was from.
Well, you know,
the only thing that's changed since then is the money.
Well, yeah, and in fact, in changing the money, one thing we should point out is that the basketball scandals in the 50s and the 60s centered, for the most part, around Madison Square Garden, our dear departed home, and it was based on the fact that gamblers had gotten involved. Now, it's not so much the gamblers, it's really the money that's being thrown around for the players directly, the perks they get.
There's too much money involved for gambling at this point, yeah.
But it's not the gambling money that's going to the players to throw games. It's the money
the first scandal in 51, Adolph Rupp, the Baron of Kentucky, said that they couldn't touch his players with a 10-foot pole, and they wound up, implicating the whole team he had.
Yeah, well, and the city college basketball team.
The NBA kicked out Alex Groza and Ralph Beard because
and City College, which won the NIT and the NCAA that year, they had at least three players who also were implicated in that gambling. Stanley Cohn was on a few weeks ago and talked about that. He wrote that.
Yeah, and in the 61s, NYU had a player that both Hal and David should remember, named Ray Paprocki.
That's right, Ray Paprocki.
He said he had two small kids, and he said you can't feed babies on basketball trophies.
Yeah, and you know what? Ray Paprocki had been recruited. He was an Army vet. He was working in the building he lived in as the janitor, the superintendent of the building, and going to school. And and they got to him. The guy was definitely a tremendous basketball talent. And it was sad. I mean, he didn't put the money under his bed like some of these other guys did, who were on full scholarship and didn't really need the money. Paprocki needed every dime he could get hold of, which isn't.
Well,
I'm
the
not
biggest
defending
tragedy is Connie Hawkins, and you could put Roger Brown with him, I guess, but his story is told in the terrific book Foul, and it just cost him the bulk of his career was lost. We saw he was great in the NBA. He spent 4 or 5 years, but he was a shell of what he was even in the high schools on the courts of the city of New York. So comes down to it.
The thing is that one of the problems with everything now is that you can make Patino and certain other people as fall guys, but the base of the problem, I don't think anybody who is involved in that has an interest in cleaning it up.
Alan, I think you're right. I mean, I hope that it's going to happen, but the fact is that, the NCAA, they seem to turn a blind eye to a lot of this stuff. And there's been a lot of these scandals in football. I mean, these guys are getting all kinds of perks and paid and never going to class, and the NCAA, they get but, for instance, North Carolina, again, I don't want to point fingers, but North Carolina has been investigated for years and years and years. And yet, as far as I know, they have never been put on probation because they're a money cow
who they
for
are,
the NCAA.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if you take North Carolina away from the NCAA tournament, I mean that's a huge blow. So on the other hand, though, the NCAA will crack down on schools that don't have a big impact because of the fact of who they are. But lo and behold, I mean the NCAA puts Brown University on probation, which is absolutely ludicrous.
Yeah, because a couple of players played in a summer baseball league.
Whatever, yeah.
And they don't even give out athletic scholarships in the Ivy League.
No, they don't. Yeah. The Ivy League doesn't. They get grants and aids. They, Princeton, Harvard, Dartmouth, Yale, all those, Brown. I mean, they don't give scholarships like the other schools do. They do grant and aid, and a lot of ways they get around it. But the fact is that Brown University will never be a major basketball power like in North Carolina, but yet they will be penalized, and North Carolina will not.
Well, guys, the latest North Carolina case, academic fraud. What is a worse crime for a college than academic fraud?
Right.
And yet they got off scot-free.
Yes, they did.
I don't understand that. That's just bizarre.
Well, they have academic fraud at the academies. That is an absolute example of how our society has become corrupt. And it's not just sports. It's at every institutional level. And it's craziness. Our parents are turning over in their graves at all of this. I can assure you that it's craziness. Hey, thank you, George, for teaching me red shirt. I should have learned that.
My pleasure, Ralph.
Probably 49. I just never had it explained so succinctly, and I appreciate that. I'll remember that. And the rest of you guys, you're terrific. This is fun for me. I get to go back as if I'm standing out and listening to the gamblers in the lobby and right outside by Nedick's at the Garden at halftime, and they're chewing on cigars, and they're going, when does it take place? Well, do they know? Thank you, guys. It's a pleasure reminiscing.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Good night.
All right.
Good night.
We'll be back next week.
Good night.
If you're listening to our offerings and you enjoy them in any way, please, if you would, box up some lightly used children's books and take them to the Head Start program in whatever community you live in. They will be well appreciated. They will get kids reading, get them school ready, and it would be a big help. I'd appreciate it if you do that. Come back next week. We'll be here talking vintage sports from the Old Garden on 49th Street at Nedick's. I'm Ralph Tyko, Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, George Case III, David Hubler, Al Blumkin, and Hal Bock. Adios, everybody.
Okay. Good night.